The Chicago Bulls have to make up their mind and decide what direction do they ultimately want to go into this offseason. Do they want to stay in the middle of the pack, try to compete in this Eastern Conference like they have been and fall into the play-in season after season after season, or do they finally want to rip those band-aids off, fully reset, go towards the bottom, and finally push for their number one star? Well, we're going to dive in and explore the Chicago Bulls offseason in this episode here on Swish City, where we've been diving in and looking at every NBA season's offseason breakdown, looking at players that I think they could trade, players I think they could draft, and players ultimately I think they could sign in free agency to really help bolster their team to pick a direction either to contend or to go towards the bottom. If you like this video and if you are a Chicago Bulls fan, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section if I hit the Chicago Bulls in the right sentiments or if I am completely off. I would love to know your guys' thoughts as well. And if you are new to this channel or series and you find these interesting, definitely check out the other videos in the playlist as there's a bunch of other teams that we've already dived into. Without further ado, let's get into today's video discussing the Bulls. So like I discussed, we're going to be talking about the middling Chicago Bulls as, once again, they sat in the middle of the Eastern Conference and did virtually nothing, getting eliminated from the play-in and falling 39-43. And probably the worst part for the Chicago Bulls was with the draft lottery, as we all know the Mavericks got the number one overall pick. The Bulls sat at 12, but the Bulls lost a coin flip to the Mavericks because they had a tied record, and that's what gave the Mavericks that jump. Now, obviously, there's no way to predict that if the Bulls were to be in that spot that they would have landed number one, but if you do eliminate that, it is just crazy to see that one single coin flip really screwed this Bulls team out. But we want to discuss this team. Like I said, they have some young players, they also have some older players, and they've kind of picked a direction that they kind of want to go to, but they are still middling at this point. And if we want to look at their salary cap sheet, look at their offseason, look at their projections, we can see right now currently they have 6 free agents here down the list and are only having projected $140 million salary on the books, putting them $40 million under the tax threshold and obviously $16 million under the second apron. This gives the Bulls ultimately the most flexibility to either take on some bad contracts or potentially really reset this roster like we have seen. We all know that Zach LaVine was one of their key pieces and they looked to move him last season to the Sacramento Kings, getting back some salary cap filler contracts and guys like Kevin Huerter. They also got a guy in Zach Collins, and I believe that was it off the top of my head. But we'll have to see what the Chicago Bulls ultimately do and kind of discuss where they land. Right, I said they were projected to get the 12th pick. They did land the 12th pick, so did not fall in the draft. So let's dive in and let's explore what the Bulls should do this offseason by looking at players that they could trade. So I think the first player that we have to really discuss and talk about with the Chicago Bulls team is Coby White, as him this season had a really solid season for the Bulls, and similarly last year he also had a pretty good season for the Bulls, rising as this star and kind of blossoming with this team without Zach LaVine. And we all know that the Bulls had, too many guards or too many scorers really on this roster, and Coby White was kind of that six-man guy. But now that he has had that leash kind of lengthened and he's been able to flourish within this Bulls system without Zach LaVine, he can clearly show that he can be that shot creator, that scorer, and that volume piece. Now, ultimately, I don't think that Coby White, is a number 2, number 3 option realistically on a championship team, but I do think he could be a solid role player and, efficient scorer for a team where he's insulated by some solid wings and defenders. And I think there's a plethora of teams that would be interested in adding his scoring to their unit if the Bulls did make him available, where the Bulls once again could take back some salary filler contracts or potentially strike on a young piece or two that hasn't really hit their untapped potential to really fit in with this new young core and direction that this team, in my opinion, should be heading. I want to see the Chicago Bulls kind of go towards the bottom of that ladder and stop middling around, if you guys couldn't tell, in this Eastern Conference. Even though it is weekend, I do think the Bulls, this is their prime opportunity to really realize to strip down to the bottom of the Eastern Conference where no one is really at the bottom so far and try to find their guy in the draft. So I think at this point, trading a guy like Coby White to get back some solid contracts and or a young piece or two, maybe even some draft capital, could be key for Chicago. And because I'm saying they're going to be trading some of their players, once again, we're going to be discussing Nikola Vucevic, someone who got an extension with the Chicago Bulls, who on my opinion, should have been signed and traded that offseason, but was not. Brought back to Chicago on a 3-year, $20 million deal. Now, ultimately, is looking like a solid backup big slash, pretty consistent starter, but obviously not that third or fourth option that Vucevic was just a couple seasons ago. And with a lot of teams needing bigs, I expect two teams in the West Coast, like the Lakers and or the Warriors, to be interested in a guy in Vucevic. And I feel like if you're the Chicago Bulls, you had the option of trading him to the Warriors last season at the deadline for guys like, GP2 and Looney, which, still do that trade because you're getting off of Nikola Vucevic and you're getting free money and the potential to sign free agents or to make a big swing at some point if one of these young stars really pans out. But also, Vucevic just doesn't really fit your team, and realistically, you should be going for a young center to really find that cornerstone here in Chicago. Virtually, if that's on the trade market with another disgruntled center, which, maybe DeAndre Ayton could be that guy that could really find himself here to Chicago if they really do find themselves in a deal. But ultimately, I do think the Lakers, Warriors, and plethora of other teams should be interested in a guy in Vucevic, and the Bulls should be looking to move off of him for, either some draft capital and or some filler contracts once again to really reset the books and kind of identify what direction this team could be heading in. And then the last guy I want to talk about who got his contract restructured in the middle of the season is Lonzo Ball, who's been dealing with a plethora of injuries. And once again, I think he could kind of stay with this Bulls team. He's probably the least likely to be traded out of the three, or who I would be trying to trade out of the three guys that we have been discussing, just because he is on a $10 million deal, I believe, for the next 2 seasons, or at least one more season with the Chicago Bulls. But he has had some injury concerns. That's where it gets a little wary for teams wanting to trade him. But Lonzo, obviously, at his peak, can be a solid playmaker, shot creator from the three-point line, as we saw develop in NOLA and then transfer over into Chicago before he got injured. But also is a pretty solid defender as well at the point guard position. Once again, kind of a lot of teams should be interested in Lonzo Ball if he does become available. Teams that kind of need that fringe starting point guarder maybe are willing to take that investment on a cheap contract in Lonzo Ball, just moving off of one of their own. And I feel like for the Chicago Bulls, this is probably one of the most tradable contracts that they do have. So I wouldn't be shocked if they do look to move off Lonzo, and then who knows, maybe even draft a point guard to really fill that role, or go into the free agency route, which we'll discuss in a little bit. So now that we've looked at some trades, let's look at the Chicago Bulls draft. And at pick 12 here, once again, there's going to be a lot of names that I've mentioned in previous videos for Chicago that I do like, but I have 4 names and 3 pictures that I want to bring up for Chicago that I think could really help out their squad if they do lean into this younger direction. And obviously, last season, we do know that they selected Matas Buzelis with the 11th or 10th overall pick, and he was a very solid player for this Bulls team, kind of leading the way. So when we look at some players that I think the Bulls should be interested, one of them is Derek Queen. Once again, can play that power forward slash center, whatever you want to do with Derek Queen. And like I mentioned, with trading Nikola Vucevic, if you do give him up and get a guy like Looney Tunes or potentially, some salary cap filler back, you're not going to have a true starting center. So drafting a rookie and really investing in that could be your new cornerstone. Now, I don't think Malawak is going to fall to 12, but if the Bulls decided to trade up, maybe that's the case. But if not, a guy in Derek Queen, I think, could be a fantastic move for the Chicago Bulls here, regardless if he plays the power forward or the center, because Patrick Williams doesn't seem like he's going to be a long-term investment either. So I do think that the Bulls have some leeway with taking this Queen pick, for regardless of the position they wants to play. Once again, I feel like the Bulls kind of need that center. So looking at another one in Colin Myers-Boyle, I think he could be another piece for the Chicago Bulls that they could really go out and get. And I actually just completely butchered that, but I don't have the editing power. So Colin Murray-Boyles, from South Carolina. Once again, I think he could be a solid rim protector. He is once again, really beefy center and one of the strongest centers in this draft class. And once again, is right around the late lottery. If the Bulls do feel that they want to get a guy in Murray-Boyles into their system to play that center if they trade Vucevic, I think he could be a great piece. But not only just that, I think that if Derek Queen goes off the board to a higher team, this is the next best center, and once again, a core piece that the Bulls could really look to evaluate. And then if the Bulls want to look wing, I know they have Buzelis, but if they want to add another wing, maybe a guy like Carter Bryant at pick 12 will be a fantastic move for this team as well. I've mentioned him in multiple videos, but he's kind of projected to go around the lottery. And once again, with Patrick Williams not being a long-term solution, you can get a guy in Carter Bryant who can play the 4, solid shooter at three-point range, solid two-way defender at both levels inside the perimeter and on inside the paint, and outside on the perimeter. And I think he could be another great fit alongside these guys, depending on how you really feel with this team. And then lastly, I want to mention a guard in Jace Richardson. I did not mention his picture or bring his picture up, but I think that depending on what the Bulls do with this guard movement, right, as I mentioned, Lonzo Ball I think could be traded, Kobe White I could be traded. They have a big free agent that we're going to mention just in a little bit as well that plays the point guard position, and Ayo Dosunmu. The Bulls have a lot of guards. It's going to be a tough decision to see how much money they're really willing to shell out there, but with them having a lot of money in free agency, potentially trading Nikola Vucevic and Kobe White to also save some money, I think them kind of going for a point guard doesn't make the most sense, and I would rather target someone like either Derek Queen, Colin Murray Boyles, or a guy in Carter Bryant. But ultimately, I do think Jace Richardson is also another pick if they don't bring back some of those guards and they still want to replicate that shooting. Putting him alongside Josh Giddey could be a nice piece as well to really replace Kobe White's scoring and shooting at a younger value. And then lastly, talking about free agency, like I mentioned, the big question for the Chicago Bulls is Josh Giddey and what he's reported to get. Now, I did see a rumor that I think he's believed to get 5 years, $120 million, which if the Bulls offer him that type of contract, that is a big win for them. Giddey this season was a huge swing that they got. After everyone kind of was like, no first-round pick, all you got was Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso. A lot of people were very nauseated with what the Chicago Bulls were doing. But in the second half, with Zach LaVine being taken out of this lineup, you could clearly see the rise and ascension of Josh Giddey. And he was not a great fit for Oklahoma City because he needed the ball in his hands, similar to guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and some of their other scorers. But you obviously had Alex Caruso, a defender that they need, an off-ball guy who can really help out their squad. It's a perfect fit for them. And for the Bulls, Caruso wasn't making much sense because they weren't going anywhere. And Giddey is one of those young, untapped potential pieces, like I mentioned, that you can maybe get in a Nikola Vucevic trade or a Kobe White trade that could really pan out for your squad down the line. And Giddey was one of those untapped gems that wasn't really working out and really blossomed. Him and Matas Buzelis could be this next kind of fundamental building blocks as well for this Chicago Bulls team, which I'm really, really interested in to really break down. So I'm very excited to see all of this, and I think Giddey back on this team on a team-friendly contract will only help them kind of grow with their young passer that they are going with. So once again, like I mentioned, the Chicago Bulls, in my opinion, are the best slot to really strip down and really reset themselves here going into this off season. In my personal opinion, I don't think they should be competing in this Eastern Conference, even though it is a little bit weaker. There are no teams towards the bottom, and even teams like Washington and Charlotte still have a little bit of promising futures than a team like Chicago does with their youth and involvement. So if I'm Chicago, I'm stripping things down, trading guys like Vucevic, Kobe White, and Lonzo Ball, trying to get back as much untapped potential or filler contracts as I can, maybe take on some bad contracts in some deals as well, moving some of my other guys, trying to stay young, trying to get some of this youth movement really going in, and then eventually trying to strike into the top 3 or top 5 of the draft, really being able to lock on and get my number 1 superstar to pair alongside guys like Josh Giddey, whoever I select in this draft class, and with Matas Buzelis and with other surrounding pieces. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Once again, we're doing these videos every single day for you guys, breaking down these teams. And if you want to check out the other videos, I mentioned a player in common, Maluwak, that I think could be a big fit for 3 teams, and 3 of those teams are actually interested in Maluwak ahead of the draft. So I'm pretty spot on kind of with some of my analysis so far, and I'm really liking that. And you guys as well, some of the fans have been letting me know in the comment section that I have been right about their teams and following their direction. So if you are a Bulls fan, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.